Okay. Hi guys. Good morning. Um, Sorry for the technical hitches. We're really sorry about that. It happens sometimes with some tech-based products as well. It's something beyond our control. Firstly, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Philip, and I'm a tutor with Flourish Field Academy, the same academy organizing the Spring Summer Camp live HTML and CSS session. And today, we're going to be building out a whole lot. We're going to be building out a whole lot. Firstly, as you can see on my screen, we have this really beautiful landing page, a Figma design that we would be translating to a very beautiful website looking exactly like this, being built with technologies like HTML and CSS. And I'm sure you guys will be very interested to build something this nice out. So we're going to do this in steps from installation of the code editor we'll be building this out with up till the very last. Now I understand that this is just a 1 hour session, so we're going to do it in steps, one step at a time. Firstly, let's install the code editor we will be using to build out this platform. And that code editor is Visual Studio Code. Now, of course, we can use any other code editors out there, like Brackets, like Sublime Text Editor, and interestingly, you can actually use your Microsoft Word, but that comes at a cost though. But we're going to be for the purpose of this project, we're going to be sticking with the Visual Studio Code Editor. It's very popular and it has a lot of built-in supports. Now, firstly, I have the Visual Studio Code Editor already downloaded on my computer, but I'll walk you guys through the steps of downloading and installing this interesting code editor. To do that, all you need to do is go to the website code.visualstudio.com/download. Now, I'm on a Windows computer, so I'll be selecting Windows. But if you're on other operating systems like Mac or Linux, you definitely want to select your system-specific applications. But I'm on Windows, so I'll be selecting Windows. Now, as soon as that's selected, the download begins automatically, and you can also force start the download by clicking on this button you see here called download. And as you can see, it's downloading. I already have it installed, so I'm not going to go through the installation process with us. I'll just wait just about a minute for the download to be done, and I'll walk you through the installation process myself, but I won't be installing it completely as I already have Visual Studio Code downloaded. So we have a few seconds. Alright. And there we have it. It's done. Now to install it, all I need to do is double tap on the installed file and a window pops up with my installation directives. So just a second, it's loading. Great. First, you need to click on the accept agreement. You have to read it as well because you never can tell. There might be promise of a full-time role for downloading Visual Studio Code. You never can tell, but just read the license agreement, and if you're good with it, of course you will. But just click on accept the agreement and then click on next. You need to click on next a couple of times for you to download. Just keep clicking on next and you'll be good to go. But I already have it downloaded, so I'm not going to go on with this. I'll just cancel. Yes. Now there we have it. Now back to the web page I introduced us to that we're going to be building in today's live session. Let's take a look. Now this is a really beautiful landing page design for a travel agency with beautiful colors, with beautiful images, high quality images, I'll say. beautiful colors as well, and we're going to be building this out in steps, and I'll guide us through everything today. Now I have all the images and assets needed for this, and I have them in a folder, and I'll be leaving a link to the folder after the live session already. So let's go on, and the first steps we're going to be taking would be, first we need to create a folder. Now that folder is very important because you wouldn't want your files and images, we're going to be having a lot of images, you wouldn't want them littered everywhere. In fact, folders help us arrange our files properly, and not to mention the advantage it gives us in terms of hosting. So you really want to create a folder. So to do that, I like creating my folders on my desktop just for easy navigation, but you can actually create your folders anywhere you like on your computer. But for easy navigation, I like creating it on my desktop. So I'll just go to the desktop, I'll click on new, and I'll select folder, and I'm going to be calling the folder pre-summer camp. Now as you can notice, I know pre-summer camp is like combination of three English words, pre, summer, and camp. But our computer does not treat spaces as it should. It treats them as actual characters. So if I was to create a folder name with characters such like pre, leaving a space, summer, leaving a space, I would be sending a different message to the computer, meaning it might get confused at some point. So in place of leaving spaces, you could use camel cases as I have done here, and camel cases are simply writing the very first letter of the next word in capital letters. And alternatively, you could also use underscores. Underscores are also perfect when naming your folder, just so we have a single name. Now next up, I'm going to be opening this folder just so we see we have absolutely nothing in the folder. It's an empty folder we just created with absolutely nothing. But in the course of this live session, we're going to be creating a lot of files inside of this folder. Now walk with me. Now I like refreshing just so I get the best performance from my computer. So I'll be opening up this folder in Visual Studio Code. Remember, we downloaded a text editor called Visual Studio Code earlier on. So I'd like to open this folder in Visual Studio Code by simply right clicking, and I have an option here that says open with code. I'm just going to select that option, and I'll wait a few seconds for that to be done. Great. Now of course I'm the author, so I trust myself. I'm going to be selecting yes, I trust the author. Now the moment we open our empty folder in Visual Studio Code, an interface looking exactly like this clearly hits us. Now if looking to the left hand side, you'd see the same folder we had created earlier on, because we actually opened it in Visual Studio Code. So we see the folder with nothing inside. So we're going to be creating files right inside of this folder. And the first file we're going to be creating would be the HTML file. Remember, this live session deals with HTML and CSS. But the very first file we're going to be creating would be the HTML file. And to create that, walk with me. All I need to do is click on this any empty space I see here, because this is the folder we created. So spaces inside of here are just empty spaces right inside the folder, and I want to create the HTML file inside the folder. So I'll right click, option that says new file. I'll click on new file, and now I can give my file a name. So I'm going to call it index. Of course you can call it absolutely any name, just please do not leave spaces when you're naming your files. Also, don't start with numbers because it can be a little confusing for your computers. So just stick with words and do not leave spaces. So I'm going to be calling the name of my file index. But because it's an HTML file, I have to tell my computer that this file I've created is certainly an HTML file. So I'm going to be adding what we call an extension to this file name. An extension tells the computer a lot more about your file. And to add an extension, I simply add dot followed by the extension name HTML. And I press enter. Here we go. Now we have our very first HTML file. But this is not all. We only have an empty file with absolutely nothing in it. Our next steps would involve us writing our HTML codes. To do that, there is a very important step we must take, and that is writing out our boilerplate codes. Sometimes people refer to base code, regardless, they mean the same thing. It is just 11 lines of code that we must have in order to properly structure our code, our websites. Now, it's important to also mention that HTML only has one task, and its job is to provide structure for our web page. So as soon as we're writing HTML, we'll be seeing text, we'll be seeing videos, we could be seeing images, but they won't look too beautiful. But not before we add another file called CSS. So HTML provides structure, strictly the structure. And we're going to be doing just that by first writing out the boilerplate or base plate codes. Now, it's 11 lines of codes, and sometimes it can be very tasking to memorize. So another advantage of using the Visual Studio Code text editor. So the text editor provides us on the jump with the HTML boilerplate codes. And all I need to do is simply write the text HTML, and the version we're working with is the 5th version. So all I need to do now is select HTML version 5, the second option you can see here. Now here we have the same 11 lines of code. Interesting, right? Now let me delete this and I'll show you a different way of doing exactly the same thing. Alternatively, you could have tried to make the exclamation mark and selecting the very first one. You can see it gives us the exact same thing, the exact same structure, the exact same boilerplate codes that we were able to generate earlier on. And trust me, these codes all have their meanings. And I'm sure you'd want to find out what each and every single lines of these codes could mean. Now walk with me. First, before we come back into dissecting the boilerplate code so that we understand what they all mean, let's take a look at our results. And I'm sure you'd want to see it. So to view our results on the browser, all we need to do is go to the file name, right click, and you can see an option that says copy path. I can select this option and I'll go to my browser and paste that path I just copied. Here we have it. Now to be sure that I copied the right path and what I'm seeing is the exact same file I intend to see on my browser, the name on this particular tab should match what you have in the title. Now we'll come back to this and explain what all they mean, what they all mean rather. Now, but before we get to title, let's start from the very top. Of course, you could see we have absolutely no result on our browser, and that's because in as much as we have the boilerplate codes, is just a starter template for HTML. We haven't told our browser to display anything at all. Now, to what the boilerplate codes mean. First, the first line says doc type. Now this line is simply telling our browser that please, this is a document and it's a HTML document. And the second line, as you could guess, it tells our browser about the language in which you are writing this code. It's English. And you might wonder, isn't this just a document? Why is it having heads? Well, interestingly, HTML is structured as the human body. So, as we have heads as humans, HTML also has heads. And it plays the exact same important role. So every piece of code, every line of code you see here in the head is very, very important. And you should take really care in making changes to it. We're going to be making our very first change to this head. Now, again, let's take a look at the Figma design we are going to be replicating. Firstly, the name of the travel agency landing page is called Jado. Interestingly, it will make a lot of sense if we see Jado here instead of document. So that's going to be the very first change we will be making. To do that, we'll go back to our VS Code, and that is called a title. So I'm going to go here and replace document with the text Jado, Jadno. Again, let's take a refresh and see if we've done the change we desired. Good. We have made the exact same change that we desired. Impressive. Next step would be to take another close look at similar web pages. You can see from my tabs that other websites have images right beside their title. Interestingly, it's a very easy task to achieve. So we're going to also be adding images right beside this title of ours. And that image is called an icon, sometimes called a shortcut icon, and most popularly known as a favicon. We're going to be adding that in a moment. But favicon is also an image. So to add that, we'll definitely need images in our websites. To do that, I have images already downloaded, and I promised earlier at the end of this live session, we're going to be leaving links to the images so you can also download and follow as we build. So I have the images already downloaded and I saved them as media. I'm just going to rename them. I'm just going to rename, and I'm going to call it assets. Of course, you can call it absolutely any name. And this is our folder. I'm going to cut this and put it right inside of the folder. And that is because we would want to be picking images directly from the folder we're working on and not bringing them from external folders. So I'm going to copy that image. Yes, I'm going to copy it. And I'm going to be pasting it right here. And I'm going to be pasting it. Good. Now I'll have the same folder appearing on my Visual Studio Code. Now let's go and we can see that for ourselves. Great. Perfect. Now I have the same folders I earlier had in my images folder appearing here in my Visual Studio Code, and you can see the essence of having folders. I don't have my images littered everywhere. In fact, I have them well arranged in a folder called assets, and this is best practice so that you don't have your images just scattered everywhere, because websites contains loads and loads and loads of images. Now In order to add the image, first let's take a look at the image we want to add. Let's take a look at the image. Good. Now here is the image of our logo. It has a transparent background, so it's a bit faint. So I'm going to be adding it as a shortcut icon, or sometimes called a fav icon. All right. And to do that, very easy. We'll go back to our HTML file and write in the head. You can totally place this tag absolutely anywhere, but it must be located in between the opening head tag and the closing head tag. Now, what you have on line 3 is known as the opening head tag, and what you have on line 7 with the / is known as the closing head tag. So I can place that shortcut icon absolutely anywhere here. And to do it, I'll just do it on a new line. Now, for me to place the icon, there is a tag I need, because HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, which means to mark up any text, we'll be using tags. So everything in HTML is a tag, and our icon is no different. To do that, I'm going to be adding a link called fav icon. And I'll be making some changes. I'll be taking the href out. I'll be taking the type out of href. So I'll need the href to specify a reference. And I'll also need to make changes to the href, because what I need here is the logo called jado.png. So what should be contained in my href would be the relative path to Jado. And to do that, all I need to do is to place a full stop followed by a / sign, which means look inside of the folder. Now mind you, the index.html file is currently inside of the pre-summer camp folder. So this means look inside the pre-summer camp folder. And I want to find the assets folder, which is where I have jado.png. Now I'm going to save my work by pressing Ctrl S. And now let's check out what we've been able to do so far. I'll go back to my browser. I don't need to copy path anymore because I still have my path. All I need to do is reload my page. And yes, there we have it. We have been able to successfully add a fav icon, or sometimes called a shortcut icon, to our web page, which is the very first step I took in building out this travel website. Now I'm sure we might have a few questions boring down on how we are able to achieve that, but not to worry, you can leave your questions down here in the comments and we'll attend to them in our very next session tomorrow. Okay, now let's go on. Again, I have to refer back to our landing page, so we'll take these steps like I promised earlier. Now, taking a look at our landing page, would like to build out the website from the easier part to not really difficult, but the relatively more easier part to do, which is the background. So I'll be starting off with building the background. Now let's pay attention to this background closely. If you take a close look, there seems to be an image somewhere on the background. Now I also have that image downloaded and it's still in the assets folder. Let me show that to us. So I'll click on assets and there we have it. So this is an image of our background. So we are definitely going to be making our background have this image. Interestingly, like we did with the fav icon, this is also going to be very easy to achieve. Walk with me. Now I'll close this out so we don't get confused. And to build out our background, we must understand that whatever we want to write, whatever image, whatever text we see on websites generally, are always coming from a part of this HTML called the body. Well highlighted here. So everything you write in the body is what you can see on your browser. To put that in context, let me go back to the Figma. Take a look at the design. What I actually mean is what you can see from the top here, from the logo here, all the way down and across, are all coming from this section called the body. So in the body is where you write all the codes you would need. Now, since we understand that the body contains everything, I think it will be very interesting to note that we can also style that body to have our background. Work with me. Now, to style the background, we will need another file called a CSS file. Now, CSS is short for Cascading Style Sheet. And to create a CSS file, very easy. In the same way we created HTML, all we need is a name and an extension. I'll right click on the empty space like I did earlier, and I'm going to be creating a CSS file. And this is going to be called style. Let me call it style.css. Now, this CSS file would be used to style our HTML files. The CSS file would be used to style our HTML files. So this is more like the syntactic sugar for HTML. So when you're done with the structures, you begin to talk about styles. Now, in order to style our background, let's test it out. Let's be sure that our CSS actually works. So to style our background, there are 3 steps we must take. First, you need to pick out the tag. You need to select the element you intend to style. And the element we are going to be styling is the body. So I'll go to the style and I'll select body by writing out the text body. That's step number 1. Now, step number 2, you also have to open up a curly bracket. Now, this curly bracket helps you hold all the styles that concerns the body. Now, to test this out, let me give it just a background color and see if it works. One of my favorite colors is brown, so I'm going to be giving it a brown background color just to see if it works. So I'll need to write a property called background color, and as well I'm going to need a value, and the value would be brown because I said my favorite color is brown. Let's take a look and see if this actually works. Now this is our web page and I need to reload, and there you go. As expected, it doesn't change to brown, and the reason is we only created a CSS file, but we never informed our HTML of the presence of a style sheet. So we need to do that so that the HTML picks up styles we have indicated in the styles.css. Now to do that, also very easy. We'll come right in the head. Again, you can place this absolutely anywhere. Just make sure it is in between the opening head tag and the closing head tag. Now to link my CSS, I'll need another tag. So called the link tag. And as you can see from the options, it says link CSS. So I'm going to be selecting this. And you can see again, the relationship says style sheet. It's a bit different from the previous one we had where the relationship says shortcut icon. So this relationship is style sheet. And the name of our CSS file is style.css. But let me just show you how to add that. I can simply write style.css, and I can do this because my CSS file and the HTML file are both in the same folder. Alternatively, I can still go through what I mentioned earlier by saying /, which means look inside of this folder, and as you can see, all I need to select is style.css. But it means exactly the same thing as not doing that. Now let's reload our page and see if this takes effect right about now. And there we go. As you can see, perfectly linked, perfectly fine. Now we're sure that our CSS is linked to our HTML. Now the next step would be to actually add our background. First, I'll go back to my Visual Studio Code, my beloved text editor. I don't want the background color of brown, so I'll take that out. Instead, I actually want a background image. Remember the image we spoke about called the core? Well, this happens to be the image used on the background of our landing page, the same landing page we are trying to recreate. So just to show you, I'll reload, we're back to white, and now let's try to add that image. I'll close this out, and to add the image, I'm going to be specifying a background to the body. And there's a difference between specifying background color and background. So for background color, what you intend to do is strictly going to be color based. So all you can do with selecting a property called background color is add a color. But I'm not going to be using that since I don't just want to add a color, I want to add an image. So I'm going to be selecting a property called background. Now this is a step higher than the background color, because with this I can not only add images, I can also add colors. But first let me show you that I can add colors with this. So I'm going to be adding a color of pink. Good. Let's see if this works. I'll reload, and as you can see, it works the same way our background earlier works. Our background color works. Now let me add an image just to show you the power of the background, which is not possible with background color. So I'm going to be adding an image, and to do that, I already have the image saved in my assets folder. So I'm just going to be specifying a property called URL. And URL is short for Uniform Resource Locator. More or less exactly where can I find the resource I want to specify. Now I would have to add the path to the resource, and all I need to do is press the /, which means look inside of this folder. I'm going to go right to the assets folder, and the image I want is the core.png. Now let's take a look at what we have here. Let's see if we have that image appearing. Actually, the image shows up perfectly fine. It's just a little faint because the color kind of rhymes with the white background. Maybe I should change. Okay, I can't really change the background color now because I have an image already. So I could either use an. But as you can see, I have an image already. Good. Now that's an easy way of adding an image. There's a little bit more we can do with this image though. Sometimes you get that effect of a faint looking image or an overlay on an image. Well, that's exactly why choosing background over background color sometimes, depending on your scenarios, depending on if you want to add an image or if you strictly want a color. But if you want a combination of both, you'd want to look at background instead of using background color. If I wanted to add an extra layer of color, maybe as an overlay, I could add linear gradient. I could add linear gradient, and I can add a color scheme, RGBA, and let's say 255, 255, and 0. This gives us a yellow color actually. And so let me make another one. I have another RGBA. I have 255, 155, and I have 10 as well this time. Now this yellow. We have bright yellow and we have a little bit more dark yellow. Now let's take a look at what this looks like now. If I take a reload, now you can see I actually have the image. Of course, with this perfectly, our image suits perfectly. Now you can see that the background image also shows up. So I'll be taking out the gradient and going back to our Figma, so we look at the next steps of what we are going to achieve. Again, I would like to remind us, if you have any questions, please feel free to leave your questions down in the comments below, and we'll make sure to attend to those questions in our next live sessions coming up tomorrow, same time. Okay? Good. So I'll be back to my Visual Studio Code, and I do not want the linear gradient actually, so I'll be taking it out. And please do not forget, after every property and value pairs in your CSS, always end them with a semicolon. It indicates the end of a statement. Now, in the same way a period or full stop sign in English language indicates the end of a sentence, it's the same way in programming a semicolon indicates the end of a sentence. So I'll go right back to my browser. I'm having to go from browser to Visual Studio Code and to a Figma design, which is it's a normal thing. We're getting used to it. Now, we have been able to do our very first task. Now, it's time to try to work on the navigations. Now, the navigations are all the text you see right at the top, from the logo down to the navigation links and down to the buttons. Those are called navigations, and we're going to be building those out right about now in our class session right now. Good. Okay, to build that out, let's take a look at what we see. Now, from my point of view, I see a logo and I also see navigation links. So I'm seeing two elements and I'm going to be grouping them as such. Now, the first group is going to have my logo and the second group is going to have all my navigation links. Now, remember I said at the very first part of our lesson that HTML gives us the structure. So we're going to be using HTML to structure this our navigation. Okay? Now, first things first, I'll be going back to my HTML. Now, like I said earlier, everything in HTML is a tag. And in HTML, there is a tag called nav. It's a tag used to create navigation elements. And I'm going to be using that to create our navigation elements. So to do that, I'm going to have a nav tag. As you can see, I have nav opening tag and nav closing tag. Let me create a space. Now, inside of that space, we're going to be having everything we call a navigation bar here. We're going to be having our images and we're going to be having our links. Okay, first things first. Now, we have an image of our logo. I'll be adding that image first of all, just so we can see. And again, everything in HTML is a tag. So to add an image, we also need a tag. And I'll be using an image tag, IMG for short. Great. Now, simply placing the image tag here doesn't do the trick. As you can see, if I reload my page, I still would not get any image at all. I don't get any image at all. So to get an image on my screen, what I have to do is specify a source. So once you add the image tag, let me do that one more time so you can see. I type IMG and I select the very first option. Now once you add the image tag, you also need to specify a source. Now a source can be from an online source or locally from your computer. Now I have my logo locally in my computer called jadu.png, as you can see. So I'm going to be using this logo as my image. And to do that, all I need to do is come right in my source and repeat the same thing I did in my href earlier on. Specify the path using the /, which means look inside of the current folder. And I'm going to get to assets, and the image I want is jadu.png. Now, let's take a look and see if that image actually appears on my screen. There we go. Now the image actually appears on my screen, which is beautiful, which is really beautiful. Now let's move back on and continue with our tasks. Interestingly, we still have another attribute here which is very empty, and sometimes it might be good to leave it empty. Other times you'd want to fill out text here. Let me just write out the text here and I'll explain what this attribute actually is. I'm going to call it logo of agency. Now ALT here stands for alternate. What this means is it provides an alternative text in a case where something gets wrong with the image. Now if I reload my page, I don't get to see anything. But here's where the trick really happens. If I have an error in my name, in my image, I have the name of my image is jado, JADOO.png, but I have a self-inflicted error here saying JADNOO.png, which doesn't actually exist. Let's take a look at what happens. If I reload my page, you can see the alternate text saying logo of agency, which means that logo of agency is what was supposed to be there. But if I make that correction, I don't get to see my alternate text anymore. Instead, I'll get to see my logo. Now, as you can see, the logo is slightly big, and we're going to be making adjustments to the logo. Okay? Now, let's take a look at our web page one more time. We got the logo, and we also have our links. We have links, and we have a button at the end of that link. So we have to fix this. Good. Now to fix this, all I need to do would be to create anchor tags. Like I said earlier on, everything in HTML is a tag. And to create links, we would be needing a tag. Now, obviously, there are different ways, different techniques, various methods of creating link tags or navigation tags. Some people would use the unordered list elements with list tags inside before putting out the anchor tags, which is totally fine, and others will simply use the anchor tags directly, which I'm going to be using because it's very easy and as well makes our design less cumbersome. So I'm going to be using the anchor tags directly. To do that, I would need to create a separate group for our links, and I'm going to create that, and I'll tell you why. So I'm going to be creating a group called links. Let me create a div, and div is short for division. Division, more or less like grouping. So I'm going to create a div, and in the div I'm going to be having links. Now the first link I'll be having is destinations, then I've got hotels, I've got flights, I have bookings, I have login, and I have a sign up button. So I'm going to be creating a links. To create a link, use an anchor tag. Now, and I have to write an anchor tag. All you need to do is write the text A, and you can select link here. After selecting the link, now I can write the text I see on my screen. The first text is destinations, so I'm going to be writing destinations the same way I see it on my design. Destinations. And the second text is hotels, and then flights. I'll be doing the same thing. I have an anchor tag, I have hotels, same thing. I have another anchor tag, and I have flights. I'll take this out. Out as well. We won't be needing that now. Before we continue, let's take a look at what we've been able to add so far and see if it gives us the desired result. Let's take a look. It's looking good, but I'm sure you might be wondering, why is it not looking exactly like we have here? Not to worry, all we need to do is structure it out first, and then we begin to style. Like I said earlier, again, HTML gives the structure, and then CSS provides that really nice styling you see from time to time. So again, take a look. This is what we have here, and we still need two more links: bookings, login, and even sign up. So we need three: bookings, login, and sign up. So I'm going to add 3 links, anchor tag, and this is going to be for bookings. I also have anchor tag, log in, and I have one final anchor tag which says sign up. Great. Let's take a look at what we have now. If I reload my page, structure looking good, style still not there yet, but we are going to be doing a lot of styling to make sure that it looks exactly like what we have here. Now, first, you might be wondering, why did I have to use a div here instead of simply writing out the anchor tags like that? Now, let me explain. If you take a look at the navigation, what I see a lot of space in between the logo and the links. I see loads of spaces, which means although they are both in the navigation element, there's still some separation between the logo and the links. And in order to create that separation, in order to create that division, to group them properly, we use divs. Now, a div is a tag we use to group HTML elements. As you can see from my example, I use a div to group all the links. Now, it's time to try to style our elements one at a time. So first, I think we need to take out all the underlines we see here, because if you look at our web page, there were no underlines there, first of all. So I'll be taking that out first. And to do that, we will need to style. Now, back to our Visual Studio Code. To take out those underlines, notice how all of them have something in common. They all have anchor tags. So to take out the underlines, I'll need to style the anchor tag. I'll go to my style, and now I'm going to say A, which is standing for anchor tag, selecting this. Remember, we linked the CSS to this HTML. So whenever I write A in my CSS file, it's going to be referring to every single anchor tag I have in my HTML. Alright? It's going to be referring to every single anchor tag I have in my HTML. So I have A here, and now, like we did for body, we're going to be opening curly brackets. Now, to take out the underlines, we have text decoration called none. Now, having added the text decoration property called none, if I reload, we can see all the underlines have been gone. Still a little bit more work to do though, because one more thing, the text here are looking like a different color. We have a purple colored text here, whereas in our design the color is black, and there's a bit of a difference with the fonts as well, which we still have to take care of. So I'm going to be changing the color of the font, the color of the text firstly, and to do that we already specified the anchor tag. So all I need to do is specify the color and say color should be black. Great. Black color. And now let's take a reload and see if our changes, exactly, our changes have taken effect. One more thing though, apart from the fonts, as you can see, we have a different font which we're still going to take care of. Apart from the fonts, two things. First, the links appear to be on the same line as the logo, which we currently do not have. For us, the links appear underneath the logo. Secondly, the last link, which says sign up, actually appears to look like a button with a border. Well, not to worry, we are also going to take care of that. But first, let's make sure that the links and the logo appear on the same line. Now let's go. Now, to do that, by default, HTML is a block scoped language, which means that for every single tag you add, it's going to come one underneath the other. That's the reason why we have the image appearing right above the div. Notice I said div groups the elements. So all of this you see in the div is regarded as a single group, and that's why you see them appearing just directly underneath the logo. But that's the default behavior of HTML. But we can do something to it. So let's make a slight change to the display. To do that, I'd have to select the parent element. And the parent element in this case is the nav. So I'll be selecting the nav, and I'll be writing a bit of styles to the nav. Now, the first style I will be writing would be to do a bit of adjustment to the display. So I'm going to say display, and I'm going to be using a flex display so I can have access to make sure I can place the elements anywhere. So I'm going to be using the flex display, and I like taking a look at my results after every change, because it's programming. A lot of things can go wrong if you're not very careful. So we have to be very careful as we build this out. So changing the display already gives us a lot of results as close to what we want. All we need to do is add a bit more space at the top and then space them out properly. Now, back to our design. As we can see, there's a lot of space in between the logo and the text. Now let's add that space as well. To do that, still in the nav, I'd have to go here and add a new style. Now this style was going to be called, hold on, I'm going to justify my content space between. Now I'm going to be justifying space between because if you look at my structure, I only have two elements. I have the image and the div. So when you talk about two elements, you talk about between. But if it's a bit more than two, you'd want to be using the word among. But obviously, we will be talking about that later. So I'm going to be using the style called justify content space between. This helps me add a space in between the two elements I have. Now the two elements I have here, remember, are the logo and the links, just like we have it in our result here. So the two elements we have, the logo and the links. So let me take a look at our results so far. Good. Now as we can see, we have a lot of space in between. We still have a lot of work to do to make sure we have adjustments and make sure our navigation is styled properly. But the session is exactly for 1 hour and our time has been exhausted. Now I want you guys to go back, watch the video, enjoy the channel, enjoy what we've been able to do so far. And if you have any questions, please feel free to leave the questions in the comment down below, and we'll be attending to those questions in our very next session tomorrow. Now our session tomorrow is going to be by the same time, 9 a.m. I'll be glad to meet you guys there and see you guys again in our very next session. Bye for now and see you guys tomorrow. Bye bye.